you can live longer in a wheelchair. You can live longer bedbound. So it's about how well your body functions over time, and that starts in the gut.
Controlling 70% of our immune system could make a world of a difference in our bodies.
Hormonal imbalances, right? Especially in Black women. So when we think about Black women and fibroids, Black women and hormonal dysregulations,
What is the gut telling the brain? Like, how do they talk to each other?
having the right bacteria in your gut or the right ecosystem that is going to help with mental and physical, but also what we talk about, the longevity.
It just makes it make all the sense in the world that the gut is literally universal for every single part of our body to check.
We talk about the detox before, the parasite cleanse, and you're still not getting better. It's time to seek professional help.
70% of your immune system lives in your gut. And right now, most of us have no idea what's happening in there. We're bloated, we're exhausted, we're gaining weight, we can't explain, we're inflamed, and we keep treating the symptoms without ever looking at the root. Meanwhile, the foods we're eating every day, the process, the package, the convenience, it's destroying the one system that connects everything. Your immune health, your hormones, your mood, your weight, how fast you age, it all starts in your gut. That's why today I'm sitting down with Dr. Firlande Volcy. She's a licensed naturopathic physician with over 15 years of experience in natural medicine, a nationally recognized speaker, and a best-selling author. She specializes in digestive health, weight loss management, and thyroid disorders. And today, she's pulling back the curtain on what's really happening in your gut. We're breaking down why ultra-processed foods are fueling a chronic disease crisis in America, what it's doing to your body, and how to finally fix what's been going on in your gut. If this is the kind of conversation you need in your life, subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode. This is the Lushness Podcast. Let's get into it. Dr. Firlande, welcome to the Lushness Podcast. I want to start with a stat that I came across, and I think every woman watching this needs to hear it. 70% of your immune system lives in your gut, and that's 70%. I was blown away when I saw that it was 70%. And yet most of us have no idea what's going on in there. We're dealing with bloating, inflammation, weight gain, fatigue, and even like skin issues, and we're treating symptoms without even looking at the root. And here's what makes it so critical for Black women in general. Researchers found out that gut microbiomes are being shaped by stress, by our environments, by the social conditions that we live in. And even one study that I saw showed that like half of the Black women in America are classified as obese. And like 13% are living with like diabetes. Like that blew my mind when I saw all this. And that the gut may be like the biggest overlooked factor that's driving these numbers. So I wanted to kind of start there with that. I always love to kick off with a stat because I want to prove that the science is here and why it's so critical and important to discuss. So I would love for you to shed thoughts and just a strong sense of conviction of why gut health and longevity is so important for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I am a gut health expert. And one of the things that we need to know is that your gut is the command center for your entire body. I call it the epicenter. About 70 to 80% of our immune system resides in our gut. It regulates inflammation, produces key nutrients like serotonin, which we're going to touch upon a bit later, and helps with absorption of nutrients. So if your gut is inflamed, if it's out of balance, with something that I do on a daily basis, look at people's results on what's going on in their gut. If the immune system in the gut is not healthy, every system will be dysregulated in the sense that your hormones will be out of whack. And health, when we talk about brain fog, and just kind of like not being able to remember your words. We think about metabolism, so your metabolic system, your thyroid, all those particular system will be down regulated in that sense because your gut health is not where it's supposed to be. So
Right.
when we think about longevity, longevity isn't just about living longer because people are looking to live longer, but we also have to look at the quality of your life. You can live longer in a wheelchair, you can live longer bedbound. So it's about how well your body functions over time. And that starts in the gut. So you have to look at the gut for longevity.
I love that. Ooh, that was good. Yeah, I don't wanna live long time in a wheelchair. No, no, no.
That's
No,
correct.
no, that's very, very true, and that's such a key point to touch on, the fact that you wanna live a long life, but you want it to be on your terms,
Correct.
and that's really important to and I mentioned the gut microbiome. Can you explain a little bit about that? Maybe someone maybe just hearing that term for the first time, explain a little bit about what it does and how important it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the gut microbiome is the ecosystem. So I remember when I was going through undergrad, because I have a microbiology major and I also had a minor in biology and another major in chemistry. So we study a lot about, bacteria and viruses and parasites. So one of the things that once I studied medical school that I looked into was the ecosystem of the gut. So which is made up of bacteria, fungi, right, which would be like your yeast, even parasites, right? So people are always doing parasite cleanse, but if when the system is well balanced, you have the bacteria that keeps everything at bay because it is supposed to work together and the microbes living in your digestive tract. So that's really what the microbiome is microbes will influence everything from metabolism to mood. And I know one of the things that we talk about, why does that even matter? It matters because if we think about a hierarchy, so if you don't have the right amount of bacteria, so everything else, yeast can take over, parasites can take over, viruses can take over. So if we're not taking care of the microbiome from the top, making sure we have beneficial bacteria, then we also have an imbalanced system, which can cause more problems.
Yes, I'm glad that you said that because I was gonna ask, like, what are, like, the sure signs that show that the gut is definitely compromised? Like,
Oh my
something
goodness.
yeah. Yeah, because we're walking around with this and we don't even know. We think it's normal or, "Oh, it's just gas," or no, there's real things going on, and I think that gut health is one of those strong things that we really should be educated on
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
controlling 70% of our immune system could make a world of a difference in our bodies. So, tell me, what does a compromised gut look like?
Oh, of course. So when people think about compromised gut, they usually go into the bloating, the gas, the constipation, just having, cramping pain. Those are definitely typical signs and symptoms of a compromised gut. But what they don't take into account is the fatigue after eating, the brain fog, which I mentioned earlier, the sugar cravings. I actually had a patient come in and one of the things that he mentioned was like, I have lots of sugar cravings, or I just crash. Like right after I eat, I just crash. Why is that? Right? So, because your gut is compromised. We also think about skin issues, acne, eczema, psoriasis. I see a lot of patients with those particular skin issues, but the first thing they go to dermatologist, they put them on some type of anti-inflammatory or something for the or steroids, right, which never really solve the problem. Hormonal imbalances, right, especially in black women. So when we think about black women and fibroids, black women and hormonal dysregulations, estrogen dominance, right? You don't have the right bacteria to metabolize your hormones, thereby those hormones are increasing in the bloodstream. It's not so much that you're making more hormones than other people, it's so much that the right bacteria have to come in to metabolize the hormones. So they are not being metabolized, they are recirculating into system, causing estrogen dominance. So these are early whispers, right? So we think about whispers before it becomes a bigger problem, such as autoimmune illnesses, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure.
Yeah, that's the manifestation of
Mhm.
something that has gone untreated for a long, long time. And that's what we want to prevent as much as
Correct.
possible. So I wanted to talk a little bit, you touched on something, and I wanted to go back to that about the
Mhm.
gut and brain axis as far
Mhm.
as affecting mood and fatigue. And what is
Mhm.
the gut telling the brain? Like, how do they talk to each other? Like, this is really, really interesting because it really is coming from there. And we're thinking, oh, it's something going on just here and localized, when in reality, this is a full communication system
Communication.
going on. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about, gut health tied to our brains.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the two-way communication. So you have an access between the gut and every single organ in your body. So it's not any different from the brain. So when we think about the two-way communication between the brain and the gut, the communication is done via what's called a vagus nerve, right? And chemical messengers. Your gut produces about 90% of your feel good hormone. So we call that the serotonin. So imagine if your gut is compromised or things are off. This is when people start having mood disorders, right? Anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. And also because you're not producing the right amount of neurotransmitters, not just the serotonin. Maybe GABA could be off, right? Maybe your dopamine. So people get their high from dopamine, and
Yes.
drug addicts get their high from drugs, right? But
Mm,
regular people get their high from food, like the sugary foods that we eat. So again, if the gut is compromised, you're going to have more of those cravings because you want to satisfy those neurotransmitters and those pathways that are usually compromised by an unhealthy gut. So definitely having the right bacteria in your gut or the right ecosystem that is going to help with mental and physical, but also what we talk about the longevity. The strategy to having longevity is really balancing the gut and the brain axis.
yeah, I like that because for me personally, I have had gut issues since I was 16 years old.
Mm,
16. I
wow.
was the one that had to rush home. It has always been something with me, and like my stomach, always stomach issues since I was 16. And so as I've gotten older, I have made it my business to be on my prebiotics, my probiotics. It has been religion for me because I realize the mood shift. I do realize how everything feels better. I don't have to run home to the bathroom like when I was 16, and that was a young age to really be going through, that type of
Right.
upset stomach, gut issues, and things like that. So it's really important for me now, even now that I'm older, even with perimenopause on the way. Well, actually, not on the way, it's in full swing at this point. But yes. And so I have to pay attention to my mood, my everything that's going on, that I do feel the estrogen drop and the switch. I do feel it. So I really try my best to do as best as I can with my gut health because that has been something that has impacted me for years.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about a little more deeper
Mhm.
about even the labs that we should be requesting to
Mm.
check on our
Mhm.
gut health. This is something that, once again, no one is signing up voluntarily to say, you know what, let me go see the gastroenterologist, let me go see a gut health expert. No
Mhm.
one's talking about these things.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about what those labs should be looking like. What type of labs should we be getting?
Oh, absolutely. So, being a naturopathic medical doctor, we do a lot of what we call functional labs. Unfortunately, those are not the labs that you're gonna walk to your regular gastroenterologist or your internal medical doc, and they're gonna say, "Hey, let's go ahead and run on these labs," unless, of course, they are functional doctors. So the first thing is, I'll just give you an example of what we do here at the clinic. First thing, we have a package labs for them. So we're gonna do the regular initial labs, looking at your liver function, your kidney function, as well as, what's going on with your white blood cells, your red blood cells. Do you have an infection? Do you have iron deficiency anemia, B12 deficiency anemia? We're also going to look at your cholesterol, right? Cholesterol is another sign of high stress. When you're stressed, your cholesterol can also increase because that's the precursor to making your cortisol. We look at your thyroid function, right? So we at the beginning we mentioned hormones. If your gut is not well balanced, of course, the thyroid is not gonna be well balanced either. So you can start having the weight gain, cold hands, cold feet, dry skin, brittle nails, all of those things. But also, we look at your vitamin D, especially in African Americans. We tend to have a lower vitamin D, and a lot of times we don't even bother to check our levels, right? So the melanin keeps us from absorbing as much vitamin D when we go outside. So it's extremely important that we look at the vitamin D. So that's going to be your initial lab. But when we go into more functional, we're gonna do a stool analysis. The stool analysis is gonna look at good bacteria. The commensals, those are imbalances. You have too many of those that can shift the system to the right, meaning that you can end up with dysbiotic bacteria. We look at, do you have overgrowth or parasites? We also look at your inflammatory markers. So your calprotectin, your lysozymes, when those are extremely high, now it's not just IBS. You may have IBD, which is irritable bowel disease. We look at the health of the gut, the immune system. What is the immune system doing? This is called secretory IgA, which is your immune response. We look at as well as you have blood in your stool. What's the pH in your stool? So all those factors are important in the stool analysis. So if your stool analysis is not giving you all that information, you may want to, again, see a functional doctor. We also look at your adrenal stress tests. Why is that important? We're talking about chronic stress and longevity. So if, let's say, your night cortisol is super high when it's supposed to be low, it can keep you up at night. We are in the age of social media, and the internet is scrolling every night. So we have blue light activation, right? So now we can't sleep. Our cortisol is too high. That is going to affect the microbiome. And then we also look at food sensitivities, right? How many times we hear that, okay, you are not just what you eat and what you absorb. If you're not absorbing what you're eating, you could be eating the most delicious food and you still have problems. If you're eating delicious food and you're sensitive to those foods, a broccoli, for instance, since it's that broccoli, that can also lead to more inflammation in the system and in the gut. And then lastly, we look at something called intestinal barrier assessment. What does that do? We look to see if you have leaky gut. So particular markers, some particular type of protein, like something called zonulin, if that is elevated, that is a sign that you have leaky gut. So in a comprehensive way, you cannot just look at the person just through the blood. You have to look at the urine, the saliva, the stool, right? And I just gave you an example of all those things. I will include all those different factors because what you put in that goes into your blood is not so much what you metabolize. So that's why we look at the urine and the stool.
That's amazing. And what I love about that, it's almost like a car, right? You go for a tune-up, but it's not just fixing the engine. You're checking
Okay.
oil, you're checking, and all of that it just makes it make all the sense in the world that the gut is literally universal for
Right.
every single part of our body to check. And just you mentioning urine, and you would think it's just compartmentalized just to the gut, the stomach, but you're going for urine, you're going for everything else. And that is so comprehensive and smart,
Mhm.
if you're really going to diagnose a situation going on, within your gut. So I want to talk from a naturopathic standpoint.
Mhm.
When we talk about gut healing,
Mhm.
what does that look like from, your standpoint versus, let's say, traditional medicine, and things of that nature? What does that gut healing start to feel like, look like, and what's the first step toward it?
Gut healing is about restoring balance and function, right?
Mhm.
So we are in a comprehensive way grabbing all the data and then doing a step-by-step process to making sure that we are addressing not just what shows up the things that do show up on paper, but also addressing the patient's symptoms. The first thing is removing the triggers. We have to remove the triggers. That's why we do food sensitivities. So processed foods, excess sugar, food sensitivities, those things have to be removed. The other things that will need to be removed, so if the patient has overgrowth of bacteria, yeast, viruses, parasites, or pathogens, those need to be removed as well. The second thing is replenishing, right? So it's not all about let's take away, take away, take away, because if you just continue to take away, you can leave the person deficient, right? So we want to replenish the good bacteria, making sure that you are on a good probiotic, make sure that you're doing fermented foods, you're drinking clean water, you're taking some digestive enzymes, we are decreasing inflammation. The third really is like repairing the gut lining. So I mentioned how we do an intestinal barrier assessment, which is assessing for leaky gut. So if the patient has leaky gut, we have to repair the gut lining. And that's one by including all the things I already mentioned, but there are particular supplements that are specific to repairing the gut and also making sure that we're addressing any type of stress, because chronic stress can also lead to more inflammation and can lead to more damage to the gut lining. And the last thing is reducing inflammation. The more we reduce inflammation in the gut, the more that is going to help to support the system overall. So it's not a quick fix and it's not a quick detox. And I hear all the time people saying, I'm doing a parasite cleanse or I'm doing a parasite detox. It's about rebuilding a healthy internal ecosystem so that the system can work together synergistically instead of separate.
Ah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I have I'm going to be nosy. I'm going to
Yeah.
snoop in. With your Black women patients, are you seeing any trends in their gut health? Is there anything that you are seeing that is something that you're like, oh, I wish Black women knew more about this because I see this so frequently in my office, specifically to us. What would that be?
So one of the things that I see a lot, Black women and fibroids, hypertension and diabetes. So what does that look like in the gut health? A lot of time is a lot of inflammation. Those inflammatory markers are extremely elevated. What I see often, a yeast overgrowth. Right. So
Mm.
lots of yeast overgrowth in Black women and then impairment of the immune response. So a lot of time, instead of having high immune responses, we have very low immune responses. So the secretory IgA tends to be more on the low side. So overall, like again, no one person is the same, but what I see across the board is those particular characteristic or distinction that I would see in Black women as far as what their the stool would look like and what their gut would look like.
That makes sense. That makes
Hmm.
sense because you mentioned the key markers that are impacting us all across the board when we're not paying attention to our stress, our
Correct.
inflammation, and all of those different things. So it
Hmm.
only makes sense that that's what you're seeing on a regular basis. It's just confirming what we've been hearing for the past, couple weeks, just speaking with
Right.
so many Black women experts. This is what they're saying. Stress and inflammation is the number one cause of all of the chaos going on in our bodies. And I
Hmm.
think once we master that, we'll be able to, really get a handle on our bodies. So I do have another question, which I think, would make sense for our viewers.
Hmm.
If someone came in, you
Hmm.
didn't do any test on them, but you say, you know what, these are the things that I would recommend for good gut health. What would those things be?
That's a really good question because I think the number one thing is we have to go back to basics, right?
Mm.
So a lot of people think that we're going to go more complicated than basic, right? So if you turn to food, food is energy for the gut. Food can fuel, but of course, food can be poison. So there's number one thing I would say, make sure that we are eating whole foods, right? So that's the first thing I'll look at. I talk to you, okay, what's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? This is such a simple thing that not every doctor is doing. Eating whole foods, fiber-rich foods daily. So those are things that I will do. Vegetables, fruits, and things like that. Adding fermented foods. Fermented foods is gonna be important. sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt. I don't necessarily add probiotics immediately. The reason I don't add probiotics, if the patient already have a overwhelmed system, or they have a lot of commensal or dysbiotic, or they have SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and you add more probiotics, they can have more bloating and more gas, right?
Mm.
So if you can start a little bit with some fermented foods, and that can determine whether they can tolerate more fermented foods or probiotics. We have to prioritize protein. So somebody comes in and I don't do any testing and they're like, well, I can't afford anything. So are you having good protein? Because when you don't have lean protein in the diet, it's going to lead to more cravings, and
Mm.
cravings lead to more yeast overgrowth and bacterial overgrowth, and lead to more processed foods. And of course, that is going to change the microbiome. Managing stress, right? So if you come in, it's like, hey, I can't do anything else. Can you do little things to manage your stress? That is a non negotiable, right? So can you take a walk? Can you stop scrolling? And then support digestion, right? Mindfulness eating, slowing down, some things that we don't do often. We
Yeah.
slow down, right? And
Yeah.
so we're always in a rush. We are eating in the car. We are eating when we're going to work, on the way to work. So if we just slow down and chew more, those would be some things that we must do to support gut health overall.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. I know as I've gotten older, protein is like the thing. I'm trying so hard to make sure I have protein rich breakfast, those things. And before it could have been like cereal and I'm out the door. It could be anything and that's not it anymore. As I'm getting older, my body is telling me that's not it anymore. Like you are not 18, 25, 30. You're not there anymore. So
Mhm.
that's why I definitely understand that. So my another question that I do have is what do you do when the gut issues are out of control? How do you know when to seek professional help for your gut health? Like I know that there's like the extremes like kidney stones or gallbladder stones or any of those things. Those are extreme because the pain alone will send you to the hospital.
Mhm.
You'll get there. But what are some things that we should be paying attention to
Mhm.
that should cue us to actually get our gut checked out?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is if the symptoms persist. So one of the things that we do overall, we wait for things to get chronic before we do something about it, right?
Mhm.
So if it's persistent, if it worsens or impact daily life. So this is where you have to call out all the time. This is where you can't get out of bed. So if you have like chronic bloating, constipation, diarrhea, I'll give you an example. For instance, so with constipation, you are not moving toxins out of your system. So it's basically you sitting in your poop, right?
Yeah.
So imagine how toxic that can be. Diarrhea, you're losing a lot of your nutrients, and fatigue, unexplained weight changes. So whether it's weight gain or weight loss, because when you have gut imbalances, you're not just gonna gain weight, but you can also lose a lot of weight, right? When everything, if you've tried everything else and it's not going in the direction that you want, it's time to test and it's time to seek professional help. Don't just look at some of the things that they have. The internet right now has a lot of information. Some of the information is great. Some of the information is not so great, right? So when you have been doing we talk about the detox before, the parasite cleanse, and you're still not getting better, it's time to seek professional help.
I think it's so important to know when to ask for help. I mean, we are literally walking around bloated, constipated. We're not even thinking about it. We're like, oh, we'll pass it later. Oh, but these
Mhm.
are real signs. I keep saying over and over, our body consistently yells at us. It talks to us. Sometimes it'll scream, other times it'll be a whisper, other times it'll make you uncomfortable. And I know that for a fact, like I said, my history with gut health, Lord, I know what it feels to be uncomfortable, and it's good to always seek that professional help. If there's anything that you could leave the audience with, that one last thing that they have to remember that
Mhm.
Dr. Ferlandi said, what would it be?
I think one last thing that I would say would be start simple, right? Start adding instead of subtracting. Because a lot of things that we do, we want to do everything all at once and then we fall flat on our what we stay behind, right?
Mhm.
So add one supportive thing, add a piece of fiber, a little bit of broccoli. Those things can be so supportive. Slowing down, right? Slowing down while you're eating, limit scrolling. So those are the little things you can do to not only decrease the stress in your external environment, but also can help to decrease the stress in that internal environment. So
Perfect.
start simple.
Thank you, Dr. Firlande. I loved it because, to be honest, these are the things that we don't hear often, and we should be hearing it and we should be talking about it. And I love that you touched on everything, on the crucial importance of how not just the stomach, but the brain, even testing urine, even do all of it makes all the sense in the world for us to pay attention to. And I love, 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 love what you do about gut health, being a naturopathic doctor, even though, because sometimes some of us are, and that's a topic for another day, but some of us
Mhm.
love to hear from the natural side of things instead of always going in and hearing. Not that it's wrong, because some people really do need that.
Yeah,
I'm never going to say that that's wrong, but a lot of us need to hear from a natural standpoint to return back to what we know,
right.
return back to the basics. Audit, audit, audit. Go back
Mhm.
in, take a look at what you're eating, take a look at what you're drinking, take a look at how you're feeling in the morning, how you feel throughout the day. Those are the things that no one reminds us, because no one's mother is calling them,
Right.
365 days, reminding them gut health, gut health. So we do need to keep our minds programmed around this. And I thank you for the work that you do. And like I told you before, I love seeing you, because we need more of this representation of gut health and women that look like us, that are able to tell us these things and understanding our body in specific. So thank you so
Yes.
much for joining me on the Lushness podcast. I appreciate it so much. And if you have any last words, you can share it now, but I'm full. So I
Mm.
appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah, take the first step for sure.
Yes.
Take the first step and seek professional help. A lot of people don't know where to look. So if you gotta, listening to podcasts like yours, outreach programs, they are there to help and support you.
Thank you, Dr. Firlande.
Thank you for having me.